Hello everybody, my name is Tom Hammersley. I'm going to be doing a session for you today on insider tips for a productive vulnerability management strategy. Thanks very much for joining me. It looked like a lovely session that was happening with Laurie in the other room. What did he say? Throwing fish into a pond, I think was what he said at one point. Quick bit about me. I've worked in InfoSec for around about 10 years. Prior to HackerOne, I used to work as a lead staff trainer for a big fruit company. I used to do technical enablement for them across their enterprise. I'll let you guess who they are. I currently lead the technical delivery and advisory components of HackerOne customer programs. So I'm the technical strategic set of hands for our customer and for customer delivery. I work with a large number of enterprise customers. One that was mentioned in the session previously was GovTech, which is an enormous organization, government organization based in Singapore. I'm regularly interfacing with skilled security teams on a day-to-day basis. So meeting with the security teams, driving their program forward, but I'm also regularly interfacing with the hackers and the hacker community and working with them to ensure that the reports that they submit to their customers and the information included in their vulnerabilities is suitable. All good? Cool. So the intention behind today's session is to take you through a whole heap of information, but I'm going to try and make it manageable. I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint or anything like that. There's a lot of insider knowledge, a lot of tips, a lot of strategies, a lot of best practices that I want to take you through. But before I do it, I really want to just spend a little bit of time just working out who we have in the room. And I can get you to do it just by show of hands. So I've created a simple slide. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your organization's security maturity? If you want to, you could cover the name of your organization while you raise your hand, but it really doesn't matter. Number 1 would be, we have significant gaps in our security posture and are highly vulnerable to cyber threats. In the middle, hey guys, in the middle it would be, we have taken some steps to improve our security posture, but there are still some notable gaps and vulnerabilities. And then number 10 would be, we have a robust and comprehensive security program in place that effectively mitigates cyber threats. So firstly, let's start on number 1. Anybody in number 1? Welcome to Bug Bounty. This is new to you. Your organization is just dipping your toes into the water, perhaps. Anybody on this end of the scale? Ooh, if there are, you're lying. Cool, and in the middle, number 5. Anybody on this side? Okay, cool. And then anybody at the very top of 10 feel like they're super secure, whole organization is handled? Okay, so we've got plenty between 5 and 10 then, is probably a fair example. I do also wonder if it depends on where I put those little pictures of hands as to where you would choose, whether it's the small hands or the big hands. Okay, cool. So we've got a bit of a mix. Let's get into it. I'm going to take you through a whole bunch of principles. I want to look at the software development lifecycle. I want to look at the different ways that you can engage hackers. I want to look at the different stages in which we should be considering bug bounty and considering vulnerability management. So let's do that. So first and foremost, what does an ideal vulnerability lifecycle look like? And for anybody that's brand new here, you might be thinking, well, I don't really know where to start, and I also don't know at what stage our bug bounty program might be situated. So if you think really at the heart of an organization, our advice and my advice would be that every organization has a vulnerability disclosure program. Vulnerability disclosure program, for those that are not sure, is really an opportunity, a place for researchers to submit vulnerabilities, regardless of rewards, regardless of any incentives. It's just an opportunity to submit a known vulnerability should it be surfaced or discovered. It's absolutely essential. I think there's some people trying to get in. No, we're okay. It's absolutely essential because if a ethical hacker was to find a vulnerability and want to share or inform the organization of that vulnerability, they need a place to do it. If they don't do that, then there's a chance that perhaps a threat actor may decide to exploit that vulnerability, and then that would put that organization in a much worse place. There could be reputational damage, they could have a security breach, all sorts, you name it. We see it in the papers all the time. So at the start of the SDLC, there's code review, SAST, DAST, your automated scanning. And in our approach, we believe that hackers should be at the very far left of this strategy, so as early on in the process as possible. And for us, that would be ensuring that at the code level, there's actually vulnerability management considered, security best practices are considered at the earliest possible stage. Beyond that, you then get into pen test, and we spoke a little bit about pen testing in Laurie's presentation. It's very clear and very evident that hackers can be a great asset at the pen test level. You can have small cohorts of individuals that are actually testing your systems, testing your essential assets, and looking for vulnerabilities before an asset reaches production. Then you have challenges and campaigns. And challenges and campaigns are a specialized time-bound security assessment. So having researchers work with a customer on a specialist set of applications or a specialist set of assets in a time-sensitive fashion. So they're typically doing this over like a 2-week period. You would say, hey, we've got this new application, we want to take it to market, we've conducted our typical pen testing, and now we're going to have hackers run almost a replica of bug bounty, but in an isolated environment, where it's not public, it's not part of your private program. And for them, it's really just a race against time. They want to find the vulnerabilities as quickly as possible, and they want to get them submitted to the program. Feel free to take a seat. And then we have bug bounty or private bounty. So quick show of hands, just again for a second, who has a bug bounty program at the moment? Which of your organizations have one? It's out there. And then keep your hands up if it's public. Oh, okay. Nobody in the room. That's interesting. So I think the statistic just now was that 80% of of our customer programs are private, and only 20% are public. Obviously, there's a ton of risks that come with having a public program, and there's also a pretty serious capacity issue. That number of hackers, that number of eyes looking at your assets, testing your assets, strain on your systems. You need to be ready for a public program. So for a lot of our customers, it's private. That's what makes the most sense. And private is pretty flexible. In a private program, you can have ultimately an unlimited number of hackers, but we kind of advise somewhere around the region of, say, 50 to 500 is a bit of a ballpark. Once you get into those much larger numbers where you're inviting many hackers on a regular basis, you're almost on the edge of public, and you sort of say to yourself, what would it take to push us over the edge? What would it take to have an ongoing continuous security program on the platform with hackers testing our assets all the time? Cool. So let's just do a quick story. I want to give you like examples of customers at the same time as talking about the best practices and the principles and so forth. So large hotel company, 62,000 headcount. This one's based in the USA, hospitality. And in this case, the organization just simply did not keep an up-to-date source of truth for asset ownership. You may be looking at that thinking that's the same as us, right? Do we know what assets we have? If we do, and we were to receive a vulnerability report on any of those assets, would we immediately know who the application owner is? Would we immediately know what business unit is responsible for that asset? And would we be able to actively communicate with them and resolve that vulnerability as quick as possible? It's pretty difficult, and the larger the organization, the more difficult it becomes. So for this particular organization, this resulted in the fact that they didn't have that source of truth. They weren't aware of exactly who the business units were for each asset. That resulted in increased time to triage, reduced bounty payments or slow bounty payments, and slow remediation SLAs. In other words, a generally shoddy program on the platform. Now, when I say that, I mean for a hacker, you've got incredible amounts of opportunity on the platform. There's plenty of places that you could spend your time. In fact, I think Jonathan's in here. He has an endless different array of customers that he can choose from. We've got public programs and we've got plenty of private programs, so the opportunities are massive. If there's a program where it takes a very long time for the reports to be triaged, bounty payments are really slow, and perhaps the remediation takes months, let's say 6 months, 12 months before you see a fix, it's kind of slow and it's not an engaging program for a hacker to spend their time. So it's likely going to reduce the level of engagement that you get, and you typically won't get the most experienced and skilled hackers. You'll typically get a little bit of disinterest in your program. So if you're in a position where you're looking at this slide and you think, that's us, we need to kind of restructure, then this is a good opportunity. This deck, this slide, this presentation, I'm going to show some examples of how you could do that. A couple of examples, a couple of opportunities that I could share with you now. One is that just ensuring all of your asset owners are fully immersed and aligned on what the bug bounty journey of your organization is. There's plenty of organizations that I talk to and plenty of security teams where it's really only the security team that know about what's going on, okay? They reach out to the various business units, to their development teams, and it's just noise. I don't know if anybody else has had that, where you say, hey, there's this critical vulnerability that's come through, and you just get hit with a brick wall. We haven't got time for this. This is something that we wasn't expecting. We need to put it into our sprints. It needs to be a fully aligned approach, organization-wide, and the bug bounty program and the successes of your bug bounty program need to be communicated as much as possible. There's so much juicy goodness that happens in your program, and there's so many really interesting bugs that come through. I'd say take every opportunity you can to market that to your internal teams. Help them understand what perhaps some of the gaps were and perhaps what some of the bad guys, the hackers, were able to exploit. Internal SLAs, of course, establish fully documented and understood SLAs that ensure validation and remediation are acted upon quickly and from a top down. And then lastly, maximize every opportunity to gain executive buy-in and support. For those that said they're on their bug bounty journey already, how much executive buy-in and support do you have? Do you feel, myself and Sophie, one of the CSMs, were talking just earlier, do you feel that you could approach for more budget tomorrow and expect to see it? Is it something where the value of your bug bounty program is truly understood at the highest level? In my eyes and in my opinion, it should be, because the damage that comes from a serious security breach is enormous. It's worth much more than the bounty paid out, and to an executive team, it's something that they should have eyes on all the time. Cool. So what goes into it then? When we talk about running a successful program on the platform, there's a ton of stuff, right? And in HackerOne, we have a wide range of expertise. We've got plenty of different teams that you work with. We have our CSM team, we have our implementation team, we have a security advisory team. There's plenty of help from the company to get you along that journey. But there's a ton of stuff to do and a ton of things to implement in order to run a successful program. If we look at some of the most successful programs on the platform, these are your mature, big brand, large enterprise organizations, typically with public programs. People like Starbucks, Uber, Teleport, GitLab, etc. These are like the bread and butter programs, the places that if you're new to the security world, you'll immediately want to check them out and see what's available. And if you're an established hacker, you know that you could get some of your biggest rewards here, okay? But in order to become a mature public program, it takes time. Plenty of these providers have been on our platform for multi-years, some 5, 6 years or more. And it takes a lot of time. There's a lot to get in order before you can be a confident public bug bounty program. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of these. I'm going to try and talk about them as we go. But know that it's not something that can happen overnight. Typically, when we have customers come to us and say, we would like to go public next week, usually we talk them out of it initially. You laugh in because it might have happened perhaps for one of the customers. It's a typical thing for us to really make sure that that's exactly what you want to do and you're ready to handle that level of traffic and that amount of, you've got the capacity in place and the resources to handle that level of reports. So it's a pretty difficult thing to do, and there's a lot that we can learn from with our largest enterprise customers. Now I've put this up here. There's many ways to crack a nut, right? When it comes to trying to create the perfect program in the platform, there's a ton of stuff that's really boring. And to be honest, you might have faced it if you're in bug bounty or in the bug bounty space, and certainly for the hackers, it's stuff they see all day, every day. They scan between programs, they look for interesting opportunities. Perhaps they'll look at one that's got an excellent reward structure where they can earn good return on investment. But for the most part, it's lots of language, lots of text. This is the assets we have in scope, These are the things that are available. These are our rules. Do this, don't do that. This is in scope. This is out of scope. It's terribly boring for the most part. So my advice when it comes to policy and the language in your policies, use AI, use ChatGPT, use anything that makes sense, because there's so much that already exists. There are policies, public programs that are very, very mature that can be used as a starting point to kind of build your policy and get something that your hackers can work through. So I'd say just use AI. In our own platform, I think Laurie mentioned it, but I had to duck out just before. Did he speak about Copilot, HackerOne's own AI? I think that was the end of his deck. So there's that. You can start to use services like that to kind of craft some of the language. But truthfully, there's three things that are going to keep hackers engaged in your program. One is monetary rewards. It's one of the highest ranked elements that hackers tell us is the reason they hack on different programs. Good financial rewards. I think it's something like 76%. Interesting scope and a great attack surface. So for most customers, when you're first exploring the world of bug bounty, you typically only just put a couple of assets into scope. Small systems that you maybe want to just test the waters with, stuff that you wouldn't even mind if there was that serious a vulnerability. My advice is get to a place where you feel confident that any of your assets can be in your attack surface. If we look at the large public providers, the ones on the previous slide, there's plenty of those that will say, for example, Uber will say anything Uber. If you find a vulnerability, you can submit it to our program. And then the next one is pick your battles. So figure out which vulnerabilities are going to cause you the most headache and deal with those first. For a large and very active program, you could be looking at many vulnerabilities per day, and you could be looking at quite a lot of strain on your security team. So you need to have established processes in place, be able to properly understand the severity of a bug, and properly understand what that means organizationally, and pick your battles. My advice would be over-communicate. This is a really big one, is that there's plenty of programs on the platform and hackers are submitting vulnerabilities daily. Over-communicate. Thank them for their vulnerability, let them know what you're going to do about it, let them know it's something you're looking at, come back to them when you're ready with bounty rewards or validations or whatever it might be. But for a lot of hackers, the biggest frustration is just a silent program. You know, they've spent a serious amount of time and investment in conducting their research, testing your application. For the most part, you may have not even known they were doing it. And then they've submitted a report and then nothing back from the program. That's the biggest hacker engagement killer you can get. If you want to lose your most anchor hackers, your best hackers, that's how you get it. You just simply don't respond. The idea would be over-communicate as much as possible. And then when a vulnerability actually does pop up, jump on it, stick to your deadlines, and look to remediate it as quick as possible. For different organizations, that means different things. I work with an energy provider based in Indonesia, and for them, a critical vulnerability is super critical, and they look to remediate that vulnerability within 48 hours. Because it's critical, they cannot have that remain, and they would look to receive that, triage the report, remediate the vulnerability, and then get the hacker paid as quick as possible. For other programs, they may receive a high or a critical, and it might take longer, 28 days, 3 months, depends on the program. But my advice, remediate as quick as possible, and I appreciate that a lot goes into that. The last one in this section is show some love. Show some love. Hackers spend a long time putting together their reports, and sometimes they find some incredibly novel and incredibly elusive vulnerabilities. And they spend a lot of time even just writing that up for you, complete with videos and screenshots and descriptions. Show some love. If there's something that you receive that genuinely brings value to the organization, and perhaps brings more value to the organization than you initially expected it would, because they took that extra step and they spoke about how they can chain the vulnerability and gain access to a different part of your system elsewhere, show some love. There's ways to increase the rewards, provide bonus or extra credit where credit's due. And of course, public disclosure is a big one as well. Who here has been on, we have a place on our website called Hacktivity. Who's ever been on HackerOne/Hacktivity? I would expect staff to have been on it, yeah. So somebody's like, I've been on it. So Hacktivity is our public repository of vulnerability reports that have been made public after they've been submitted. So an organization, let's pick one of the large ones we had, Uber, for example, might decide to make a vulnerability public so that others can learn from it, and they can use that as an opportunity to anonymize the information. There's nothing that would be in any way impact an individual in the organization, but it allows other security researchers to learn from it and allow other organizations to learn from it as well. There's some really good ones that you can go through. If you look on Hacktivity, there's an opportunity to filter by total bounty paid, most severe, most recently severe, all kinds of different things. And there's some really interesting ones, especially a very interesting one from one of those providers that should come out today or tomorrow. Okay, I'm not going to spend a long time on this one because two reasons. One, I hate a slide with that much text on it, and it's really boring. And another reason is it's super high contrast in here because it's on a TV and not on a projector. So we're going to skip over these a little bit. There's two things I just want to speak to you a bit about in here. One is that we spoke about hackers and keeping hackers happy. Hackers have lots of different opportunities to work together for different reasons. One thing that can happen in our platform, and if it's something that you don't enable or you haven't yet enabled, something to consider is hacker collaboration. Hackers working together. If you've ever been to a event similar to this one or a live hacking event that sometimes is put on by HackerOne for various brands of ours or various customers, that's an opportunity for hackers to come together in a physical space and hack together. This is a great way to engage hackers. It's a great way to drive higher impact and more severe vulnerabilities. And it's generally just a very enjoyable process. It's something that can be done remotely as well as in person. So my advice would be, if you're not using it already, look to engage your community, look to enable collaboration. Hackers can work together, which they typically do anyway, but they can work together and then both receive the bounty on that one report. So if they submit, let's say, a critical vulnerability and it's a 10K reward, they could set it as a 5K split each way. And much of that will happen outside of the platform over Slack and WhatsApp and the various different systems that they would use to communicate to each other. But that's a really nice one to just call out. Okay, let's talk about a different company for a minute. So I want to do a large insurance company, and the first two companies that I'm referring to, this one and the previous one, the hotel chain, are both where there's plenty of opportunity. The next two I'll talk about are doing a great job. So in this case, the application security team did not have relationships with application owners, and then their assets became stale. Typically, their assets were put into their program and then never changed. This can happen for years at a time. You could have programs where if you look into the program and you open the program up, let's say you're an aspiring hacker looking for a new opportunity and you see a program that says last update 2021, you're probably not going to spend a great deal of time there. Not always the case. Sometimes it's a great way to try and find programs that have gone stale, but in most cases that's a bit of a detractor. So this can happen for two reasons. Sometimes it can be that an organization believes that their assets have become very hardened. And in fact, there are no vulnerabilities left. And it's super secure. It's typically not the case. It's typically just there's less eyes on the prize. Okay? If you increase the bounties, if you look to find ways to engage hackers, you will typically get better results. You'll find new results, bring new talent to the program. And there's plenty of ways you can do that. First way, increasing bounties, like I said, the more they can earn, the better. Second way, make it interesting. The types of asset that you decide to include in scope, different hackers will seek out interesting opportunities. For the most part, it's typically web apps, but it might be, you might decide to put your mobile application in scope, maybe an API. You might decide to do something interesting like look at blockchain. I've got one customer that has executables in scope. I've got others that do hardware testing. It can get very, very interesting for researchers, and they can be looking for those opportunities to really earn big bucks and work with interesting technologies. Yeah, let's leave that. So let's talk a little bit about then, oh, I think I slipped aside. No, let's talk a little bit about then what the hacker community looks like. So there's a really interesting session later on today there's a hacker panel. And if you've ever been to one of our security at events or similar before, we usually do a hacker panel. Hacker panel is a great opportunity to just hear from, sort of from the front line, if you will, from the hackers, what it's like to hack on different programs, what some of the feedback is, things that they would love to see from their customers. And then in reverse, it's an opportunity as customers to talk to hackers directly and ask them, what it is that you could do in your program to encourage them to your program. Because like I said, there's 2 million or so of them, less than 1 million at any one time in a year, and there's a lot of opportunity out there. So the idea behind this slide is that hackers are real people. You'll see that later, of course. But hackers are real people. They've typically got a regular job that they have on the side, and in some cases, they're able to only hack as their sole source of income, which is fantastic. There's what are known as $1 million hackers that have earned over $1 million, and there are plenty of hackers that are regulars at HackerOne events and are deemed an elite few. So you'll be meeting some of those later today. There's the engagement survey, and again, I'm not going to go through great detail on this one. The engagement survey that you're going to see in your emails, I think was mentioned, you'll get an email with the latest hacker-powered report. In there is some really interesting statistics, and last year, this was just some statistics about what makes a hacker hack on your program. Ultimately, 72% is money, and the 79% is learning. So it's really an opportunity for them. It's an opportunity to hone their skills and where possible make some financial gains. Okay, let's talk a little bit about bounties for a sec. So for the for the customers that are already on this bug bounty journey, I'd love to just do a quick whip round and see if we can determine where the highest bounties currently sit in this room. Is that fair to say? So if you've got a program, let's just keep it with HackerOne for the moment. If you've got your critical bounties at 5K or more, hands up. 10K or more? 20K or more? Okay, 20? Okay, somewhere 20 and below. Cool. So this can vary drastically. The vulnerability that I referred to earlier, I think, is a 200K bounty. That's going to be mentioned in a couple of days. Is an example of a program that's paying incredible rewards and is a very mature program, very public. But for the most part, a private program, the bounties can vary pretty wildly. Okay? And for researchers, we just saw that 79% of researchers are interested in financial gain. So it's really important that we strike that balance. I've put a minimum here as web assets for 3K crits, $1,500 for a high severity vulnerability. But we really like to try and keep that as the minimum. If you feel that your program's perhaps lower than that, something to consider. There's over 3,000 different programs that a researcher could hack on the platform. If it's lower than that, then it's not going to be an ideal opportunity. Okay? There will be hackers that want to target those types of programs, build their skills, concentrate on learning, and then work with the bounties that are available. But 3K is the minimum that we suggest as a critical vulnerability. We've got Web Plus, which we would suggest for hardened assets that have gone through more security scrutiny, pen tests. Maybe they were part of your previous VDP. And we would raise the bounties for those. We'd maybe looking at, say, a 5K for criticals and 2,500 for your highs. Are these resonating? Do you feel like these kind of match the customer programs that are in the room? Great. Mobile, and then mobile hardened would be 10 and 15, and then hardware can get really crazy and can go into all kinds of dimensions, depends on what it is. It could be hacking a chipset, you could be hacking a car, it really doesn't matter, it's something physical. It can vary enormously. I think, oh, I can't mention that. Got too excited. Okay, cool. AS Watson, this is one of the, a great example of a customer, hence they have a logo. AS Watson's a great example of a customer that's been on the platform for quite some time, joined the platform, and it was during a time of rapid digital transformation for them. They're an enormous brand. I just want to get their figures right. Health and beauty retailer with over 16,200 stores, 29 markets, and they have over 5.3 billion customers worldwide. They're enormous, okay? And they are, you would know many of their well-known retail brand stores. They joined the platform at a time of great change organizationally, and they are now kind of considered a very reputable program, a great place to hack on for our researchers, but also very involved with many of the different initiatives that are happening at a platform level. One good example, if you've not heard of it, there's a competition, an initiative that's happening at the moment called the World Cup. It's on the final round, or the final round is actually underway right now, which is a great opportunity to bring some of the elite hackers together, bring some of our elite customers and our most reputable customers together, and have them hack in a sort of time-boxed environment on some great assets and earn some great rewards. We do a very similar sort of thing in the live hacking events. So it's really just a remote version of that, I guess, over a spread across a longer period of time. At the end of it, there's an opportunity to become the winner or the winning country for the hackers that are situated in those countries. So this is a really great program, and one great example of this, what I said earlier about pushing back on going public. In this case, they've got a private and a public program. And there's also plenty of initiatives as well. So challenges where it's 2-week time boxed, they're in the World Cup, and they're looking into the future at things like pen testing via the platform and maybe even code review as well. Okay. Let's talk for a moment about security maturity, where you might sit on the scale currently, and then where bug bounty will apply for you. I think this is quite a good slide. This is a great slide that just really emphasizes the importance of bug bounty and the importance of vulnerability management, but also might illustrate and might visualize for you some of the challenges that you have ahead. Oh, that sounds so negative, doesn't it? Sorry about that. So for a lot of organizations, early security maturity, it looks like this. You have your bug bounty program, which is continuous testing of your attack surface, financially incentivized humans, and most of your bugs are discovered here. You have common and repeat bugs come through here. Then you have your annual penetration testing, which is a smaller scope, a more limited scope, typically for compliance, and some of the bugs will come through at that stage. In an early security maturity organization, the other three may not have anything applied at all. You may not be doing any security testing at the code review level. You may be doing some automated testing, but very little. And secure design and development frameworks, following a secure framework for your development teams, might be something that's just not happening or not being considered. In other words, making sure that security is embedded in the development process and the software development lifecycle as much as possible. So for a best-in-class vulnerability management solution, it kind of flips that on its head. So rather than the majority of your bugs or your common and repetitive bugs coming in via your bug bounty program and ultimately costing money, if you look at it that way, there's plenty of them coming through, repeat time and time again, it's costing a lot of money. It flips that on its head, and it allows you to kind of think about this more as a full shift left approach. Having hackers work on your security test your assets at the earliest possible stage. So for example, you may decide to embed hackers at the code review level after automated testing and the SDLC. And then you may have hackers conducting pen tests, and by the time we get to bug bounty, you would expect that much of your vulnerabilities have been discovered. They've already been remediated. And then what we're really seeing at that last stage is what we see as only novel and elusive bugs. So the types of bugs that we wouldn't expect to see repetitive, and they wouldn't come in time and time again. The truly interesting bugs that you expect to pay out big bucks for, you know. Now, when it comes to determining a novel and elusive bug, there's some interesting things to consider. What makes a novel or elusive bug? To determine whether it's novel, it's how often do I get this bug, right? Is this a bug that we've seen plenty of times? Is it one that remains throughout my application security program? Is there some sort of trend? Is it a bug category that's part of a trend, or is it a bug that frequently gets reintroduced each time we remediate it? The idea of determining novel is look inwards, and when it comes to elusive, we're actually looking at a comparison against the rest of the HackerOne platform. So for us, this is a great opportunity to say, well, we can begin to structure the information related to those vulnerabilities, and we can help you determine what an elusive bug looks like, because we have the data from our other customers, and we can then do the comparison, in short. So how do we do that? There's a process that we undertake. The team that I work for in HackerOne is called the Security Advisory Team. Security Advisory Team, like I said, are the strategic, technical, hands-on, live within customer success. But we have a process called the Attack Resistance Review. And that really is an opportunity for us to take a deep look at the valid vulnerability reports that you've received, let's say in the last 3 months. We can then start to look through those vulnerabilities and determine what are common, duplicated, or truly novel and rare vulnerabilities, or novel and elusive. We can then compare that against the the maturity of other applications and other customers, and then we can provide you like a result or a percentage, what we call the novelty score. So if you're a customer that is now, let's say 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in, and you're thinking to yourself, what more can I do to take my program to the next level? What more can I do to engage my researchers as much as possible? My advice would be go down this road. Work with the Security Advisory Team to conduct what's called an Attack Resistance Review and determine your true novelty score for the bugs that you receive. Cool. I'll leave this one here. This is just a quick example of what is considered a cohesive security strategy. And really, if you look at it the way we just described it with the bug funnel, bug bounty sits at the helm, at the very, very top, with your SDLC and your vulnerability management below that, and all of your SLAs and incident response in place to manage things as they come through. Cool. One last slide about customers, and then I did want to make sure that you got, how are we doing for time? We're out of time. So there's about 5 minutes. I wanted to make sure you got a chance at the end if there's any questions or anything you want to ask. But a customer that would be considered a reputable customer on the platform, Shopify, is a good example. So Shopify, we all know the brand, we know who they are, we know what it is that they provide, but they've run a homegrown bug bounty program for a while, and they wanted to provide a more structured program in with HackerOne. So they introduced a private bug bounty program initially, and they later phased to public. I can't remember the exact rewards. I think I did write them. I think it's up to $200,000, I think, is the critical reward for a report with Shopify. And over a 3-year period, Shopify has resolved around about, it's been redacted. And well, I think it's something like, I'm not going to make a number up off the top of my head. It's a large number of vulnerabilities. Cool. So that is the end there for us. I wanted to just alert you to 2 things. If you're customers that are sort of looking for like, what's next, what are the best practices, what are the principles that I could follow, there's 2 recent updates. One is we put an industry best practices section on our page. Have a look at that. The other is there's now what's called the detailed platform standards. This is a cohesive approach to help customers do the right thing by hackers and ensure that hackers can expect to receive that level of treatment from our customers. So it's a sort of 2-pronged attack, if you will. And it talks about the best principles that are available. Both of those you can get to from our website.